Mama, have you ever had one of those moments where your child melts down and before you even realize what's happening, you react in a way that you wish you hadn't? Maybe your voice got louder than you wanted to. Maybe frustration spilled out before you could stop it. And then later you're sitting there thinking, that's not the kind of mama that I want to be. Today, we're talking about something really important: the difference between the false self and true self, or you might know it as the old man versus new, and how understanding this can completely change the way that we show up in our parenting, especially during meltdowns and moments of dysregulation. Mama, are you tired of meltdowns stealing the peace in your home? Welcome to Parenting Beyond Meltdowns. I'm Amanda, a Christian life coach and a mom of a strong-willed neurospicy teen. If you've tried everything from consequences, parenting books, crying out to the Father, and still feel like you're failing, you're not alone. Inside this podcast, we'll explore how faith, emotional regulation, and connection work together so that you can parent from a place of peace, even in the hardest moments. You don't have to hold it all together here. This is a safe space to lay it all down. Welcome. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to share something with you for just a moment. There was a time in my parenting when I felt like I was constantly reacting instead of responding, that my child would melt down, refuse something, or escalate emotionally, and before I even had time to think, I would react. I remember walking away from those moments feeling frustrated with myself, thinking, why does this keep happening? I love my children deeply. I wanted connection. I wanted peace in our home. But in the middle of the chaos, I didn't know how to regulate myself first. And what I eventually realized is that no one had ever taught me how to do that. I had learned how to survive in difficult moments, but I had never learned how to stay emotionally steady inside them. And that's exactly why I created the Anchored Mama coaching session. This is a one-on-one space where we sit together and we gently unpack what's actually happening in those hard parenting moments. We look at the patterns that keep pulling you back into survival mode and begin building emotional regulation skills that help you respond with calm, clarity, and connection. If you feel like you're stuck in the same cycles of meltdowns, frustration, guilt, and exhaustion, if you're raising a strong-willed or neurodivergent child and traditional parenting advice just hasn't worked for you, if deep down you know the mama that you want to be, but you just don't know how to access that version of yourself in the moment, this call was created for you. Inside our time together, we'll slow everything down. We'll look at what's actually happening in your nervous system, in your thoughts, and in the dynamic between you and your child. And we'll begin creating a path forward that allows you to respond instead of react. You don't have to keep trying to figure this out alone. You can learn how to become the calm presence that your child needs, even in the middle of the hardest moments. If that sounds like the support that you've been longing for, you can book an Anchored Mama coaching session using the link in today's show notes or at amandacalfee.com/sessions. I would be honored to walk alongside you. Okay, Mama, let's jump into today's conversation. Can I ask you something? Have you ever walked away from a parenting moment thinking, that's not who I wanted to be? Maybe your child was melting down in the kitchen. Maybe they refused something simple. Maybe the tension just kept building and building until suddenly your nervous system felt like it was about to explode. And before you even realized what's happening, you reacted. Your voice got louder, your frustration spilled out, or maybe you shut down completely because you didn't know what else to do. And later, when things were quiet again, the guilt crept in. You start replaying the moment in your head and thinking things like, why did I react that way? I want to do better than that. Mama, if you've ever felt that way, I want you to hear something very important. There is nothing wrong with you. This literally just happened to me the other day. So you are not alone. Your brain is simply trying to make the moment stop. Many of us grew up in homes where safety looked like behavior stopping quickly. When chaos stopped, the tension in the room disappeared. And when the tension disappeared, our nervous system finally felt safe. So our brains learned something very early on. If behavior stops, everything will be okay, which means when your child is dysregulated, melting down, or pushing back emotionally, your brain can interpret that as a moment of danger. Not because your child is dangerous, but because your nervous system remembers chaos as something that needed to be shut down quickly. And this is where many mamas find themselves today, trying to parent differently than they were parented, trying to build connection instead of control, trying to regulate instead of react. But sometimes feeling caught between two worlds, and that tension can feel incredibly confusing. So, today I want to talk about something that helped me and understand these moments in a completely new way. The difference between our operating in our false self or our true self. And we know that in the Christian community as old man versus new. So, let's start off with the new man. Your true self, your identity in Messiah, being an image bearer. Scripture tells us in Ephesians 4 that we are called to put off the old self and to put on the new self. Your true self is your identity given to you by the Father. When we live from our true self, our God given identity, it looks like operating from love. Walking in our true identity, our new man, we are vulnerable. We are true. We are open. We can acknowledge doubt. We can be strong and resilient and have awareness, living from abundance, which I view as faith, generosity, forgiveness, love, compassion, protecting others, and joy. Living from this place is strength and brings heaven to earth. Living out the fruits of the Spirit come to mind. Our new man is patient, compassionate, steady, and rooted in love. And living from that identity takes practice, especially in hard parenting moments. Each time you pause before reacting, each time you take a breath and you regulate your own emotions, you are practicing living from your true self, your true identity. And over time, that version of you becomes stronger and easier to choose. So, if we have the new man, that means we have the old man. So, your false self is often known as your flesh and can be your survival brain. When we talk about false self, it can sound like something shameful. And while I don't want to negate that we look at this as our flesh or sinful side of us and we can bring shame into that, I don't think that that's what the Father wants us to do. I 100% believe in having awareness and repenting of our sin. Most of the time, what we're actually looking at is just survival mode. It's old patterns that we learned through childhood. Our false self and old man, one might even call that the counterfeit side. It stems from fear. I once heard on a podcast that when we are operating from fear, that's actually not the realm in which the Father lives. That's the enemy's realm. And so if we're operating from fear, we're stepping into a place that we were never meant to. Here are some things that we see when we operate from our false self or old man. We can be fake, defensive, we hide our insecurities, our ego shows, believing in ourselves as weak, that we must be protected like we're the victim, lacks awareness. We can live from a place of lack and judgment, envy, resentment, bitterness, hatred. We're indifferent to everything around us, including people and relationships, protecting ourselves, self-serving, and lives from a place of misery. Living from false self or the old man is like living from weakness. It's not a place I want to live from. Some would say that when we live from these places, we're bringing hell to earth. It's possible that your brain learned certain responses and patterns growing up, like yelling, controlling, shutting down, pleasing others. Those responses may have helped you survive difficult moments in childhood, but a question that I think we should ponder from a place of awareness, not judgment, is, are those responses serving us? Are they serving you? Are they serving your child? Are they serving your relationship? Are they creating the kind of relationship that you want to have with your child? Understanding this allows you to approach yourself with compassion instead of shame. When we step outside ourselves and become aware of why we're responding the way we do regularly, it's about bringing clarity, not shame or judgment. We cannot change what we do not realize and what we do not acknowledge. Awareness is simply information. Point number 2. This is point number 3. So point number 1 was true self and new man. And point number 2 was old man and false self. And now we're on point 3, which is talking about that many of us are parenting between two worlds. Many of you listening right now might be standing right in the middle of the way that you were parented and the way you now feel called to parent. The old way says, make them obey, stop the behavior, get control of the situation. And for many of us, that way of parenting made sense when we were growing up because, let's be honest, it was the only option we were given. Some of us were the children, like me, I raised my hand, who just obeyed. Some of us learned very quickly that obedience kept the peace in the house. Our brains learned something really important during those years, that when behavior stops, the tension goes away. And when tensions go away, we feel safe. It might be a false sense of safe, but our brains felt safe. So now, when our child melts down, argues, refuses, or becomes emotionally dysregulated, our nervous system can react as if something's going wrong. So the other day, and this is just real life here, my daughter, we homeschool, and I realized that as I was finishing up a program I was in and I had been a little lax on grading, I realized that I thought she was just, trucking along doing her work, and she was not doing as much work as I thought she had been doing. And so I will admit, the other day, I'm kind of coming into a new season and I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, trying to get a schedule going of like, what does it look like to schedule all of the things? Like, for instance, the podcast, as well as paying more attention to her grading and all of that. And so I was already feeling dysregulated. And then I was trying to have a conversation with her about a paper. And she was dysregulated because she didn't communicate to me that she wasn't feeling well, that she felt like she needed some water. But because I called her into the room, she didn't get a drink of water. And so I don't know, she was talking like she felt like she was going to black out or something. I don't know if it was that serious. She was sitting on the bed, so it's not like she was going to fall and hurt herself. But she was completely dysregulated because of how she was feeling. And so she had a moment, I had a moment, and in that moment, I just wanted it to be done. I was like, I am done with this conversation. You can go to your room and finish this other thing. Like, I just wanted it to be over because I was like, I don't like what I'm feeling right now. Hello, it's time to process some emotions, right, mamas? We were able to come back together later, but I was having one of these very moments of, because my nervous system still feels like it does not like the chaos. And it's interesting because something that I've noticed is that with my son, I've had so much practice at, I would say, quote unquote, in my mind, doing the right thing, showing up the way that I want to show up. But with her, I felt like that I tend to just expect her to do the right thing. I think I'm going to make an episode about this, about siblings, because it's a pattern I've noticed in our own home where I can show up how I want to show up as a mama to my son. But with my daughter, because I put other expectations on her, I'm just expecting her to do the right thing. And when she doesn't, I find that dysregulating. And that is my own issue, not necessarily hers of how I show up in that. But it's a pattern that I've become aware of. So like I just said a few minutes ago, like, we're not here to have judgment about that. It's like we're becoming aware of it. And so now that I'm aware of it, I can start to actually address it and not beat myself up about it. And so I do think I'm going to create a podcast episode on that because I think it's super important to talk about siblings. I want us to remember that our brains remember chaos as something that needs to be shut down quickly. But then there's this other voice inside of you now, the quieter voice, the slower voice, the voice that whispers something different that says, slow down, regulate first, build connection, and lead with calm. And that new way can feel incredibly uncomfortable because your brain is trying to do something that it has never practiced before. It's like trying to walk on a trail that no one in your family has ever walked before. I know that I am a trailblazer in this area because I did not grow up like this. And if I'm being honest, because I didn't grow up this way, I think it's part of what has forced me to see that that way didn't work. Because even though I followed all the rules thinking it would create safety, it didn't create safety for me. It was this false sense of safety. Even I would call like a counterfeit view of being safe because I wasn't actually safe. And we can talk about physical safety and emotional safety. I didn't have either. And I know that abuse is not everyone's story, but emotional safety, you can have people in your life that don't physically abuse you, but emotionally they are. And so what does it look like for us as mamas to create emotional safety, not just for ourselves, but also for our children? You're learning a new way to parent, and maybe no one modeled that for you. And I'm here to acknowledge that that can feel scary, blazing new trails and uncharted territory. It can feel like you're out in the middle of the ocean in a boat in the dark, trying to find your direction and wondering where the heck the lighthouse is. Part of you wants to go back to what feels familiar. And in moments of dysregulation, we tend to go back to what we know. But that familiar path doesn't actually lead to the kind of connection that you want with your child. And another part of you knows deep down in your heart that something about this new path is just right. Even if it feels slower, even if it feels harder, even if it takes practice. But here's the thing that I want you to remember. Unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Sometimes unfamiliar simply means growth. It means that you're learning a new way forward. And mama, when you are raising a strong-willed or neurodivergent child, sometimes that new way forward isn't just helpful, it's necessary, because the goal isn't just obedience. The goal is connection. The goal is emotional safety. The goal is raising a child who learns how to navigate their own emotions instead of fearing them. And that begins with us. So that brings me to point number 4. Your child is learning from who you become. Your child isn't just learning from what you say. They're learning from how you show up when things get hard. They see when you pause. They notice when you regulate. And when you respond with compassion instead of control, they see that too. You are modeling what emotional safety looks like. And that kind of modeling builds connection that lasts far beyond the moment. They want to feel seen and heard just like we do. So how can we offer that to ourselves and to them? So our faith anchor this week is Ephesians 4:22 through 24. It says, it reminds us to put off our old self, which belongs to our former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put the new self created after the likeness of the Father in true righteousness and holiness. This verse isn't about perfection. It's about transformation. Little by little, moment by moment, we are becoming more like the person the Father created us to be. And let's be honest, nothing gives us more practice than parenting. Nothing. This week, I want to invite you to pause during just one hard moment with your child and ask yourself one simple question. And if this happens after the fact, if you don't pause and you totally forget and you blow up and you react in a way you don't want to, or you storm off or whatever it is, I want you to come back to this and ask yourself, and again, no judgment. There is no judgment for how we react in a moment of dysregulation. It's about bringing back awareness of who do I want to be in this moment, not what should my child do. Not how do I stop this behavior quickly, but who do I want to become right now? What version of myself do I want them to see in this moment? Do I want to model for them the easy reaction of the moment of just reacting? Or do I want to show them a way that while it may take more practice and more patience, will pay dividends into their future? I want to drop a quick story, and I think I've shared this before, but there was a time with my son where he had made some really, what we deemed as parents, not great decisions, and there was a lot of emotional turmoil wrapped around it, and I just remember feeling so angry. And I, thankfully, at this time had already been going through the coaching program that I was a part of. And so I was able to work through some things on my own. And one of the things that I just kept coming back to, because I kept thought downloading, writing all of my thoughts and feelings and emotions and all the things. I was just writing them all out on paper. And I just remember feeling so angry. And I got to the point in which I just thought, how do I want to show up here? Because I couldn't think a new thought. I couldn't even bring up an emotion besides feeling anger and a bunch of other stuff that went with it, disappointment and all those other emotions that we can feel. But I remember thinking, what do I want him to see when he looks at me? Do I want him to see a mom who's yelling and angry, even though one could say I had every right to be that because of what was going on? But what did I want him to see? I wanted him to see kindness. I wanted him to see love. And the only thing that I could think of, how do I get to that? How do I get to love? How do I get to kindness? Was How do I want to show up here? And I know that you hear me say this a lot, but it has literally saved me more than you can ever know as someone who tends to just be the person who always overreacted. This is the part that has caused me to be able to look within myself and ask, who do I want to be here? What kind of mom do I want to be? Who do I want him to see me as? And because of that question, I decided in that moment that what we were going through, it was not worth addressing in that moment. That choosing connection and attachment was more important. And in that moment, I wasn't actually actively choosing connection and attachment in the way that one would think, like we're sitting together and, kumbayaing. It was one of those moments where I just didn't deal with the thing in the moment because there was a lot going on circumstance wise. And we had just lost Cody's dad, literally while we were in Missouri and losing his dad. And I just decided that this wasn't how I wanted to show up. I didn't want to show up angry and overreactive. And how I chose love was that I did nothing in that moment and I allowed him to see a different side of me. When he expected to see anger and frustration and disappointment. Now, he saw some of that because I 100% remember telling him I was disappointed in him. I do remember doing that. But after that, because there was some dysregulation there, but after that, it was after deciding who do I want to be, who do I want him to see, I chose to deal with it at another time. But I just want you to know that the premise still holds of, do you want them to see a mom who's angry and yelling or short? I had a very short tone with my son. Giving attitude, sarcastic, all of those things. Name whatever your thing is, that your go-to thing that you do when you're frustrated and tired and overwhelmed. Like, what is that thing that you're doing? And again, not from a place of judgment, but just what is that thing? Is that how you want to show up? Is that being an image bearer of the Messiah? And again, these questions are not from a place of shame and judgment. It's just who do I really want to be when we look at ourselves? And I know sometimes that can be hard to look at ourselves because I feel like we've really been trained to not do it because when we do, there's this guilt and shame and sludge that comes up. But I think it's possible. And I've gotten to the place we can do this for information. We can look in the mirror, we can look at our choices and we can decide those were choices that I made in the past, but now I'm doing something differently. That's something that I will say that I'm not going to make an overwhelming claim of the entire past generation, but something that I remember from my childhood was that adults were always right, kids were always wrong, and adults don't apologize. And if there is anything that I have done to be a generational curse breaker in my family, it has been to be someone who is willing to admit as an adult that they didn't make the right decision, that I was wrong when I overreacted or yelled, that I was wrong when I said something hurtful. And I've said it before, I think that repair covers a multitude of sin. And I think that becoming a true self person, a person who is the hero in their story, a person who is walking in their new man, whatever terminology you want to use, a person who is an image bearer of the Most High, they are going to be willing to look at themselves in the mirror and ask themselves the hard questions and then be willing to grow from that place. And that's what I'm calling us to. This place with so much love and so much compassion, is that are we willing to do that? Are we willing to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. It's not serving us. It's not building the relationship that I want to have with my child. It's not one and done. This is something that I have learned over years of relationship. And we can feel so torn between the past and the present of how we were parented and how we want to parent now. And Lord knows there is enough judgment out there, especially if you're on the internet and just seeing the different generations having thoughts and feelings about each other. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that because I was willing to apologize, because I've been willing to take responsibility for my part where I have broken trust, emotional trust with my child, I have seen a child who was never willing to apologize come and apologize to his mama. And I think that the only reason why that happened is because I was willing to go first. So that's my question for you today. As you step into your true self, your God-given identity, your new man, and you might already have stepped into this, but I'm calling you to a deeper layer because we can always grow. We can always look more like Jesus. There's more purifying. So wherever you are at in your walk, I want you to ask yourself, am I willing to go another level deeper? Am I willing to go through the refining fire again? Are you willing to do it for yourself? Are you willing to do it for your child? Are you willing to do it for the Father? So I leave you with that today, mamas. Be willing to go first. Be willing to step into the fire first. Because as they see the Father refine you, I believe that that will not return void. I believe that the Father will do something in their hearts. I have seen it in my own. I have seen it in my sons, in the child who would literally never, he would rather die than ever take responsibility and apologize. I'm not joking. It's been 18, almost 19 years, and that was most of our relationship, which this child never wanted to take responsibility. And I have seen him take more responsibility in the last couple of years than I've ever seen him take his entire life. And I believe it's because he watched his mama step into the fire and let the Father refine her. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to step in the fire with me? Mama, if you want to go deeper into encouragement like this, join my Insiders list. It's where I share faith-filled reminders, emotional regulation tips, and real-life tools to help you stay anchored in who God says you are. The link is in the show notes today. Hey, sweet mama, I hope you loved today's episode. Can you do me a favor? If this episode spoke to your heart, would you take 30 seconds and share it with a mama in your life who needs to know they are not alone? Also, would you leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts for me? It blesses my heart to know that this show is giving you hope in hard moments. All right, I'm off to grab some protein because love and grace flows easier when you're not just running on fumes and coffee. I'll meet you back here next week for another honest and hope-filled conversation. In the meantime, mama, stay rooted in faith and anchored in love.